constructing a data source. With the data source name, we are constructing entity manager. For entity manager, I'm giving the entities package, and with that entity manager, we are creating transaction manager. I hope this is clear for you. Look at these diagrams, guys. I told you, hell of configuration we need to do in the Spring Boot if you want to connect with more than one database. Jaan le lega bhai. But if you want to connect with one database, do I need to do all these things? Everything will be taken care of by Spring Boot when there is only one database. You just need to write the data source properties in the properties file. That's it. You no need to specify what is this data source, what is this entity manager, what is a transaction manager, a DB1 config. Nothing is required. Automatically it will configure everything when you want to connect with only one database, because every table will be available in one database. Directly it should communicate with one database. There is no confusion. But here, as we are using two databases, which repository belongs to which database, that differentiation we need to do. To do that differentiation, this configuration is required. So as it is little tricky concept, in every interview they are going to ask this question: how to connect with multiple databases in the Spring Boot. Then you need to tell this part. You need to tell this diagram. If you tell this diagram, then they will understand. You know the concept how to connect with multiple databases. So if you want to connect with more than one database, then for all the databases we need to configure the data sources in the YML file or properties file. Then we need to create a DB configuration class for DB1 and for DB2. In the DB1 we will configure the data source. With the data source we will create the entity manager. With the entity manager we will create the transaction manager. In this entity manager I am telling you it should go to which repository, which entity. Which repositories are belongs to DB1, which repositories are belongs to DB2. The package names I already configured in the configuration class. Very good. With this we are ready. Now let me go to demo REST controller. Adding the data, getting the data, save all, stream of new users. I want to store users data by using this method. Okay, user repository dot. Now see here, I have created one demo REST controller. Book repository I have injected, user repository I have injected. Now guys, when I use user repository dot save all, user repository belongs to which database? User repository belongs to which database now? Can you tell me? User repository belongs to which database? Database 1 or database 2? How Spring Boot will understand that user repository belongs to database 1? I am directly injecting that and I am creating the database. How the Spring Boot will understand user repository belongs to first database? Based on the DB1 config class. Now here I am injecting book repository. Here I am creating book repository. How it will understand that? Book repository belongs to DB2? Are we telling that information to Spring Boot? Book repository belongs to DB2, user repository belongs to DB1. How I am telling to the Spring Boot which repository belongs to which database? Based on the configuration class. What I have done in the configuration class? I have configured like this: data source, entity manager, transaction manager. Chalo. Now let's do this execution. I have simply added one REST controller to store the data, and I am writing a methods to get the users and get the books. Now this one I will make it as users, and this one I will make it as a URL pattern. Now user object is having parameterized constructor, name, email ID, phone number. इसको थोड़ा निकालो भाई, इतना ज़्यादा डेटा नहीं चाहिए. Phone number हटाओ. Username and email. Let me configure that new user object I am creating. ID. Do I really need to pass the ID? I don't need to pass the ID. Generated value available basically. ठीक है? John, and I'm giving john@gmail.com. This is first user record, and this is second user record. To Smith also having a mail ID, smith@gmail.com. I'm using Java 8 concept, stream of first user object and Second user object, I'm collecting to a list, collectors dot to list. I will get a list object. I'm passing to save all. That means two user records I'm going to add entity tag. Now go to book object, book name, book price I am taking here. Book name, book ID, let me take it as 2 for Java. Book price is 100. Okay. This advanced Java, I will take it as, sorry, 2 is there now, here also 1, no problem. 1 and 2 because both are two different databases, two tables separately. Spring Boot I'm taking it as a 250. That also I'm adding. So fine. So now here I'm having a method, add data method is available. Add data method is used to add data URL pattern. Simply send a request. It is going to call user repository.save all. It is going to call book repository.save all. User repository data should be stored into H2 database. Book repository data should be stored into MySQL database. When I send a get request to users, whatever the user data stored, I should be able to get it from H2. When I call books, I should get the data from MySQL database. Is this REST controller clear for everybody? Is this REST controller clear for everybody? Yes. No need of stream also, directly you can create the objects and you can add to collection. I want to create two objects as a list. Save all method will take list iterable as a parameter. So I have created two entities by using list. Otherwise you can create a user 1, user 2, add to the list, pass the list object here. That also possible. You can do that. Anything is fine. Are you comfortable with these methods now? Two objects I'm adding to a stream. From that stream I am creating a collection object, list object. That list object I am passing as a parameter to save all method. Save all method. Okay, with this we are good with everything now. Chalo, let's start our project. DB1 data source, DB2 data source, show SQL true, auto DDL also update. ठीक है. Looking great. Yeah. Start करो. Application को एक बार clean करेंगे. Project clean. एक बार भगवान को नमस्कार करो भाई. Data should be stored into two databases. सब लोग नमस्कार किया. Right. Refresh this project. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Now, check this. How the project is getting started. No sir, it is getting started. Wait. Console is not printing anything. It is getting started. It is getting started. Screen is not freezed. Yes. If you are getting any exception, that means some people are not praying for God. Right? Okay. Now go to H2 and check it. Localhost means localhost 8080/h2-console. Right. Password. Click on connect. Am I able to connect to H2 database? Is my user table created in the H2 database? ID, email, username. So So in the user data, in the H2 database, is it creating user table? Yes. Now let's go to MySQL, show tables. Oh, book table is created in the MySQL. अब लग रहा है सब लोग नमस्कार किया. It is working, right? So in the H2, a table is created with the user table. In the MySQL, a table is created with the book table. Now, next, send a request to our application. Send a request to our application to load the data to the tables. I have created a just one dummy method to save the data to the table. /data is the method. Let us clear the console. See the console, what will happen. Localhost colon 8080/data. Send it. Data added successfully. Okay, go on, check the console. Oh, queries are executed. Queries are executed. Insert the records into user table. Insert the records into book table. Insert the records into user table. Insert the records into book table. Now, go to the database. Run this query. User data stored in the user table in the H2 database. User data stored in the user table in the H2 database. Now go to MySQL. Select the star from book table. Select the star from book table. Run this query. Oh, table name is big case sensitive. Okay. Select the star from book table. Are we able to see the books data in the book table? Are we able to get the books data in the book table? Yes. Users data is available in the user table. Book data is available in the book table. How Spring Boot understood that? It has to store the data into H2 database. It has to store the data into MySQL database. How it understood that? User repository belongs to DB1. Book repository belongs to DB2. Chalo, let's get the data 8080/user. 8080/user. Am I able to retrieve the user's data? And let's try it. I'm able to get the books data also. With this, are you able to understand how to connect with the multiple databases in the Spring Boot? Connecting multiple databases using Spring Boot. Difficult or easy? If you don't practice, everything is difficult. If you practice, everything is easy. Connecting with multiple databases using Spring Boot. Connecting with multiple databases using Spring Boot. That is the agenda. Yes, here also I can do that. What else is required is in the DB1 config we are creating data source object. Data source object will be connected to EM object. EM object will be connected to EM entity manager. Entity manager. Then entity manager will be connected to transaction manager. Entity manager will be connected to transaction manager. So this is a data source. DS is right option. So here DS will be available. Then here entity manager will be available, and here transaction manager will be available. The config class. The config class. Data source will be injected to entity manager will be injected to transaction manager. So this is the mapping. DB1 config will talk to this data source. Data source will talk to entity manager will talk to transaction manager. Same thing here also. Data source will come, entity manager will come for the second DB, entity manager will come for this also, and a transaction manager will come for this also. Right. So here also data source, here also entity manager, here also transaction manager. This DB config is going to talk to this data source will talk to entity manager will talk to transaction manager. Got the clarity now? Got the clarity now? Yes. So now people may get a doubt on the config class here. Let us see what is there in the config class. First, in the config class I am representing this class as a configuration class by using @configuration annotation, and I want to enable the transactions for this. So enable transaction management. This DB1 config belongs to which repositories? Which repositories are belongs to DB1 that I am configuring by using enable JPA repositories. Base package name I am giving. That means the repository interfaces which are available in this package belongs to first database. The repositories are available in this package or belongs to first database that I am configuring as a base package. Then after we are creating a data source object. We want to create our own data source. We need to build the data source, and I want to represent that as a string bean. For that I am using @bean annotation. Primary means priority will be given to this data source first. Right. Now data source I have given here. Even if you don't give the primary, no problem. You can remove it. @primary. When multiple data sources are available, priority will be given to this data source by using primary. This is auto-vary candidate. Here bean name I am giving as a data source. Configuration properties. I want to create a data source. To create the data source, I need the data source properties. Data source properties are available in the properties file. This is the name of the data source. So data source builder.create.build. It is going to build the data source object by using the database credentials available in the properties file with the data source name as DB1. That means here it will go to this properties file. It will load these properties, first DB1 properties, and it will create a data source for that. It will create a data source for that. With the properties, it is going to load from here. DB1 data source. I have given this string.db1.data source. That means all the properties which are belongs to DB1 will be loaded by the data source builder, and it is going to create a data source object. Are you clear with this method? Are you clear with this method? Alright. Next one. Entity Manager Factory. Sir, what is Entity Manager Factory? It is something like a session factory in the Hibernate, which will create the connection pool with the database to perform the database operations. In order to communicate with the database, we need connection with the database. Are we opening the connections, or we are asking the data JPA to open the connections? As a programmer, are we opening the connection with the database, or we are not opening the connection with the database? We are not opening the connection with the database. Who is responsible to open the connection with the database? Who is responsible to open connection with the database? JPA. Now, to open the connection with the database, we are using Entity Manager Factory. Entity Manager Factory should open the connection. For that, I am giving data source data. So, with which database it has to open the connection? That database connection we are giving by using data source. So, whatever the data source object we have created, the data source object is having some name called data source @bean. When I give @bean, IOC container will create the bean object for that method. Customized bean object creation. Okay. That data source object I'm injecting to entity manager. Using those data source properties, this entity manager will create a connection pool with the database. Which data? Here I'm giving some properties. Giving the properties optional. Auto DDL, my table should be created automatically. Already I configured that property here, DDL auto. So you don't need to configure this property. You can remove that. Okay. If you don't configure that auto DDL property in the properties file, that you can configure by using that properties method. Builder, which builder? What is this builder object? Entity manager factory builder will be available to create the entity manager data source I'm injecting as a parameter. Right. Builder.data source. Use this data source object which is coming as a method parameter. Properties auto DDL enabled. Which packages, which entities belongs to first database? That entity package name I am giving. Persistence unit DB1. Persistent units will be available in the JPA. This is belongs to first database. This entity manager belongs to first database. That is what the DB1 persistence unit. Then build it. That entity manager factory object will be created. Based on the data source, we are creating the entity manager. Once the entity manager is created, connections will be created. When we have a connection with the database, we can perform the operations. When you want to perform the operations with the database, you need to have transactions also. To manage the transactions, we are using transaction manager. How we are creating the transaction manager? By using entity manager. Whatever the entity manager bean is created, that entity manager bean object I'm injecting into transaction manager. Entity manager bean object I'm injecting into transaction manager. So this is the configuration. If you see in the diagram, data source is available. From the data source we are creating entity manager. From the entity manager we are creating the transaction manager. Got it? Connecting with multiple databases using Spring Boot. I will share this code also, guys. I will share this example with you. You can go through that and you can practice it. You can practice it. Okay? Once you, if anybody using MySQL, once your setup is and testing is completed, delete the database. Otherwise, bill will be generated for you. Otherwise, bill will be generated for you. It is a cloud database, so I'm going to delete it. Click on delete. Now my DB instance is getting deleted, so that I can avoid the billing. It is getting deleted. Once I delete the database, now my database properties are not going to work. You need to configure your database host. You need to configure your database host here. I'm removing my cloud host, cloud database. General port number is 06. Like this you can configure your password. You can configure your password. I will share this example. Okay, you guys can try with that. Thank you guys, thanks for joining today's session. So today we discussed about two important topics. One is how to do the load balancing in the microservices and how to connect with the multiple databases using. So tomorrow we will understand how to perform the code review by using Sonarchy.
అదుకోవాలంటే
Tomorrow we will
చెప్తారన్నా ఇది
understand how to
ఎట్లకి
perform
వెళ్ళా
the code review by using Sonarchy. ठीक है? 16 SPMS, 19 JRTP, and 20 JRTP. So please practice this concept before coming to tomorrow.
బాబాయ్ చెప్పలేదా
Good.
చెప్తారులే అప్పుడు పెట్టుకోలేదు కదా ఇప్పుడు చెప్తున్నారు అనలేదు నువ్వు